Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 3D Experience podcast. We will discuss everything from business to the latest technology as it relates to the process of design and manufacturing. Your hosts for this journey are John Milbury, Technical Director for Dassault Systems SolidWorks, and me, Mike Buckley, Senior Product Manager at Dassault Systems SolidWorks. Okay, so today we have a legend in the automotive industry. Mr. Aaron Kaufman is with us, and we're going to talk about some cool stuff, and it's going to be awesome to hear what he's going through. So, Aaron, for people that don't know who you are, that may live under a rock, can you explain a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Sure. Thanks for the over-the-top introduction, but good morning, guys, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, just talk a little bit about, I guess the journey we've been on, where we think we're headed and where we've been, and some of the tools we've found to do our job along the way, I think. But I own a shop here in DFW, Dallas, Fort Worth. My shop's actually in the city of Grand Prairie, and so we just moved there. Really proud of it, but it's been a big deal for us to move buildings. But we focus on building and maintaining race cars, and then on top of that, we develop a F100 suspension and drivetrain swap stuff, basically hot rod components for 57 to 79 F100s. And then other than that, though, I guess our real line of business is trying to have a damn good time, and every once in a while we succeed.
Awesome. Now, when you talk about building the stuff for the F100, you're talking about doing kits like what you would get for like a 67 through 72 Chevy pickup, like suspension drop, that kind of thing, but specialized on the Ford chassis, right? The unibody?
Yeah, and that's really where we started. And it's kind of, I guess you kind of got to go back, semi to the beginning to understand, is that, so I never really thought of myself as like a Ford dude. My dad was a diehard Chevrolet guy, but ultimately, it's like, hot rod. But then, and Jonathan's always been a little bit of a Ford guy, but John and I kind of got started in mini truck world, and then kind of moved into hot rodding, and then just turned into building everything. And so one day I looked around my driveway, and all I owned were Fords, and we're truck guys, through and through. And we saw there was a hole in the marketplace. When it comes to the Chevrolet market, it's an incredibly saturated market when it comes to all the components that are out there. Yet there still seems to be another seat at the table and another seat at the table. But the Fords seem to be so heavily neglected. Now, you might say that people don't like the Fords as much, or they're not as easy to work with. Well, the latter of the two is correct. They're not quite as easy. And we think that one of the reasons that people don't build as many of them is because there's not as much components available for them, and so the cost of building one's much higher. So we were willing to wager that some of the guys out there building C10s were doing it from a financial standpoint. Not that they didn't enjoy the truck. It's just that they would have built maybe an F100, but their money went further, and I understand that completely. Sometimes I pick projects based on how much money I had to spend on it. How close can I come to finishing a project with the money I have on hand? And that's what you hunt and get. So we decided to try and fill the gap. Probably not sound business advice to go where there's not currently a market, but we think it's an emerging market. We really do. And I think that the more aftermarket parts that are available to build successful, great working trucks right out of the box, I think the bigger that market will get. And so we're just happy to play our part.
I would agree with that. I about 2 years ago, I built a 69 C10. I dropped an LS in it, and put the Ride Tech suspension underneath of it. And I used to like cobble together all the stuff, right? And pick my pieces. And now you can pretty much go to a catalog, and for not a lot of money, you can put that stuff in there, and it runs and performs, it handles, and it's easy. And for the average Joe in a garage, you can put together a kit, right? You can bolt that stuff on.
It's easy to hit a home run, and that's a great thing. Because the last thing that the community or the industry needs is a lot of people to attempt these things and then come up with a vehicle that's unsafe, or a vehicle that doesn't work well, or someone that's really frustrated. The more people that are successful and build safe, really high quality cars, it's like the better ultimately that it is for everyone. So, so having people develop such great systems and such great kits is a big bonus. And we're just trying to bring some, if nothing else, attention and popularity to some pickups that we really love. It's kind of about that simple. And one thing is in that, because I've been, quite frankly, almost the only thing I've ever done is just build cars to some degree. And then when it comes to building these pickup components versus like doing full builds for customers, it's just the big builds take a long time. They're really expensive. And then ultimately someone's going to come to my door and they're going to ask me, you know, why they should choose me over one of my friends. So, cause like you end up knowing everyone, right? And so the thing is, I really wanted to build components that my friends could sell their customers, that they could make money putting it on, and I would never be in conflict with it. And then it's so much easier for us to focus on some of the race car aspects whenever we can focus on manufacturing parts and then having other people install them and use them. And it just seemed like a much more appropriate business model for the type of guys that we are and where we wanted to be and how we want to spend our time.
So, Aaron, this is John. Can that be done in a weekend or a couple of weekends by, you know, somebody who's fairly good with cars, maybe not an expert, but fairly good?
Oh, like with our systems? Yeah, that's the one thing that we've so far, and it's like, you know, life's an interesting thing. You know, you think you have lots of time, and you really just, it's odd how long some things take, and you get better with them. And developing, one thing I found was developing kits for other people to install came with a new something I hadn't run into before, was thinking about the end user's experience, tools, location where they're going to work, things like that. And so I kind of had to, once I got started, I actually had to scrap a portion of one of the kits and start over, because I realized that you kind of needed to understand some things that I knew to put it on. And so that's one of the things that on the redesign on it and all of our, like our stage one stuff, is that quite literally, if you've got some pretty standard tools and a couple jack stands and you know, and you got a weekend, it's like you can put one together pretty quickly. In fact, just this last week, I sold one of our trucks that we call a Jacoby. It was a 64 F100, and we built it at a car show. So at the Autorama in Dallas, Texas, we drove it in as a 3-cylinder 6-cylinder truck, just a field truck, and we did a full motor and transmission swap and full suspension on it and drove it out on Sunday night. And so so you can install it pretty quickly. And so if you're not super familiar with it, it may take you maybe 2 weekends. But if you move pretty quickly through this stuff, it really is kind of a weekend job with the things that we've built. And that's really kind of what we wanted, is that our stage one stuff is kind of for someone that wants to buy a couple $1,000 pickup truck, and they want to be able to have a car to drive their kids to school in, or, you know, go cruising around on the weekends, or if they, you know, drive to work or drive cross country if they want. But we wanted to have an easy entry point that people could feel really successful about getting in and starting hot rodding. And we've always believed that pickup trucks were some of the more cost-effective routes into hot rodding. And we stand by that, and they are. You can install them pretty quickly with really, really limited experience and pretty limited tools.
What makes the truck an easier platform to get into hot rodding than, let's say, you know, something that isn't a truck?
Well, so I'll tell you, that's one thing like I said, we're truck people. And I'll tell you, what's interesting about a truck is because it's based around so much of its utilitarianness. You got to remember, for so long, people didn't buy pickup trucks as a means of transportation. They didn't buy it to go to school, to go to work, to go to the hair salon. What they did is they bought a pickup truck to haul things around and to move tools and to move equipment in. Is they have this expressed utilitarian, aspect that's inherent. It's got a little tiny passenger compartment and a really big utilitarian area. And so whenever we put them on the ground or put big motors in them, there's something that's so cool about them because it's so far removed from what it's supposed to be. But when we talk about the entry point, because of that, yet again, on an aging platform, they are much cheaper because they're kind of their express purpose really for so long was to be a fleet vehicle, was to be used as a work tool, is that they're very low cost, and most of the time you can get them with a V8 and rear wheel drive. And that holds true even today, that pickup truck oftentimes is a cheaper solution to V8 and rear wheel drive than a lot of cars. Now you have to give up a lot of things, but if your interest was having a V8 and rear wheel drive, well, there's a lot to be said for that, that price point. And so the pickup trucks also, because they build so many of them and there's so little in the vehicle, their deterioration rate is really, really low. When you go to a vehicle from the 50s or the 60s or the 70s that has a lot of creature comforts and amenities, these systems break down. Oftentimes in trucks with roll-up windows, no AC. It's like if the steering wheel's still attached to the column and the shifter's still shoved in the top of the transmission and it's got spark air and fuel, you can tool on down the road. And so that's kind of one of the neat things about pickup trucks is they seem to hold up better over time. And they tend to be a little cheaper than cars that are sought after or desirable. And then when you're doing a restoration or build, there is just less of the vehicle there. And so a lot of times we find that pickup trucks are a much more affordable step into hot rodding.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. That's a great explanation.
Yeah, interiors are a lot cheaper. When I put the interior in my C10, it was a heck of a lot cheaper than my 62 Impala. Because there's
That is a fact, and just by square footage alone, you can see the difference.
yeah, yeah. Because then the trunk holds 10 bodies in an Impala, but
Yep.
it's like $3,500 for just seat coverings and pad and door panels. Where in the C10,
There's so much more to get right. There's so much more to line up. There's so much more to have function. And in a pickup truck, it's like, if you're not going to do the back wall, yeah, no one really cares. And it's like, whether it has kicks or not, and that's not really a big deal. It's like pretty much your interior game is door panels, headliner, and seat. And that's pretty much it, because you can go rubber floor mat, you can go carpet. It's like, depending on the trim, it's like no one ever's like, oh, you don't really have door trim on your truck. Well, this truck didn't come with it. So it's just like, it's kind of one of those things, like your obligation is a lot lower.
yeah. Well, what I thought was interesting is when I put like that ride tech suspension kit, the one that they have that has the coilovers and all that stuff on my truck.
Yeah, so we've installed so many of them, and once again, it's like we're big partners with Ride Tech, and we've done so much work with them. I think that it's like they definitely offer one of the best solutions, one of the most cost-effective solutions. You can get more, but I think a lot of times the driver has to ask themselves, like, am I going to push this vehicle to that point? And I think oftentimes the Ride Tech components really vastly are in a greater potential performance area than most drivers are ever going to experience.
Yeah, and that's what I was impressed with is like I put that suspension on that truck and it rode like a car and it cornered like a car. And it was like, that's pretty impressive,
absolutely.
For how light the rear end is in a pickup, like it was pretty impressive. I could see why people go the truck route versus hot rod stuff.
Yeah, and you can, it's like it's so much. They're just easier to get. They're easier to get, and there's something. I don't know how. I don't have a descriptive word to explain this. Right? Maybe just my lack of vocabulary. But it's like there is something really soothing, at least for me, about riding around an old pickup truck. I'm not saying it's not there with cars. I mean, obviously, we love driving everything from name a decade, and I'm into it. But the deal is with pickup trucks, there's just something that makes me happy about jamming around an old pickup truck. I like the way they do everything they do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely takes you back to being like a kid, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because it's like when you're dragging your wagon around, it's like you'd come up with all your discoveries from around the neighborhood. It's like when you have a bed behind you, I don't know, maybe a motorcycle is going to come home with me today. Maybe I'm going to go to buy some lumber. I don't really know. I'm going to do a little hot rodding, and then I'm going to get a shake and a burger, and then I might go buy a motorcycle. And just that possibility is there because you have a bed to put it in.
Yeah, definitely. And that's usually what gets us in trouble, right? Because
you
throw whatever you want in the back and you come home and it's like, well, now I got to find a place to put all this stuff.
That's right. High performance toy hauler.
That's right. So explain a little bit, whatever you're comfortable with, but explain a little bit on, the design process you're going through. How you go through that.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll tell you, we'll probably, wrap this portion of it up with something I have learned here recently. But so I've always been fascinated with manufacturing, and my father, David, was, he went to work at Wrench Style Beans. Maybe your listening audience is familiar with it. Maybe they're not. But he worked there for 25 years a day, and he taught himself automation. I remember when PCs came out, and my dad brought home PC, taught himself computers and PLCs and photo eyes and lasers and and how to run all this stuff. And my dad taught himself automation, and I got to see him do all that and go through all this. My dad, anytime he needed something, he would just make it. My dad was a maintenance guy, and I spent when I was a little kid around other maintenance guys, and so it wasn't that anything just unbelievable. Like there was no nuclear reactors built at my house. But the deal was I got to see anytime my dad needed something, he just made it. And so to me, it was just like, oh, if you need something, you just make it. If you can see it in your head, you build it. And so when it came to manufacturing, I always thought that one of the coolest jobs out there would be like getting these new cars before they came out and then developing lowered suspension and lift suspension and like being involved. And that's when I was younger, right? And then I started realizing how big the world is in automotive and what levels of design there really are and what intended outcomes could be. And so whenever finally found myself with this, like, all right, well, do we take on customer work or do we build something? I really thought that I wanted to build something that people could take home, had my name on the end of the box, and they could take it home, and they could put it on, and they could feel like they were hot rodding, they were doing it. And I've built cars for people and worked with customers for a long time, but I really thought just the idea of building, some momentum with the audience, with the people, the enthusiasts that are in it. And so if I could develop a product that people enjoyed using, and I know that we're going to have to start small, we're going to grow these things, and none of this stuff happens overnight. And so I was happy to get into, or what I thought was get into manufacturing, which I've since come to find out that I'm really way more into prototyping than I am manufacturing, and manufacturing comes along with a whole host of issues. And so that's one thing I really, really enjoy. You say about my methodology or what we think or how we go into it. I mean, I'm not classically trained. Everything that I do, whether it's good or bad or not so good or average, it's just that I've kind of been self-taught, or what happens, I find someone that is good at it, and I go see what they're doing and why they're doing it and try and do my research, and then I just poke away at it until I'm doing it. And maybe this is not a classically smart guy way of doing it, but it has been how I've done things. And so, like I was saying earlier, is like when I first started building a kit on this truck, and then I thought I got into it, and I had some pieces, and I said, well, you really got to understand some of the things I understand to be able to put this thing in. I thought, well, that's not going to work. People are going to do this wrong. My instructions are going to have to be bigger, and I have to answer more questions. So I scrapped everything, and then I kind of had to take a new approach. It's like in the television world, whenever we're trying to explain something, they kind of ask us all the time to explain it to a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? And so kind of, not that this is derogatory, but like when someone doesn't know how to do it, you really have to put something in terms that they do know, right? And so I kind of took that approach with the kit, where I don't think it's even possible to put it on inside out, backwards, or left or right. You know what I mean? Like it only really goes on the vehicle one way. And I thought that was a big step in making sure that everyone was really, really successful, which I thought would benefit me as well as benefit the user, and that they would feel so much more empowered, and never even realized that we just kind of stepped over some of the problems they could have had because we thought about it in the beginning. And I realized that as I moved through some of the individual components, that I got better at thinking how someone was going to look at it with fresh eyes. Like, how are they going to try and install it, not understanding what I know? And so that's kind of been where my approach has been, is if you've never done this before, this is your first time, what questions are you going to have? And then what things can I do with the components that make it easier to not worry about that, or go, oh, this is how this works. This must be how this goes. And so that's one thing we've taken into account, is the ease of installation and quality of finish, how well they're able to do.
Which that makes sense, because I think there's two things that are happening, right? We live in an iPhone world where it's like, oh, I should just click on it, it should work. But then we also live in the world where there's less and less people that had a shop class in high school, right? They have that fundamental skill, but they want a hot rod.
Yeah. And and sadly, it breaks my heart through and through. And like, I don't know if that's a place where we would take the conversation today, but it hurts my heart. I mean, on a for real level, that there are so few people that feel like the mechanical things, fixing things, making things is within their control, that they should be able to. I think that there's even, to some degree, people feel like that, if you get to a certain level in life, you shouldn't have to do those things. And I don't really view them as an obligation. I view them as a point of pride. Like, I can do this. I want to do this. I can express myself this way. And if you don't feel that way, then apples and oranges, it doesn't matter. But I concern myself with people that don't feel like, well, I've gotten to this point in my life and I don't need to know how to do that. Well, but I want these things done. Well, I think that you should try to do them yourself. That I think you find a deeper value in that. You've traded the money for minutes of your life that you'll never get back, and then you want this thing in your life to bring you joy. I figure the most joy to be had for any minute, hour, week that you invest in something is to do it yourself. That way you can lean on it, sit on it. You say, yeah, I did this. I invested not only my money, which I traded for time, and my actual time for these things. This is a product of a piece of my life. And, and I think that paying for it sometimes, there's a lot of people that do, and it employs a lot of guys like me. But ultimately, I think paying for it and removing yourself from the process, it's just another asset. It's not an extension of who you are. And so I really try and get more people to involve themselves in the industry rather than farm it out.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I could agree with you more. John and I talk about that all the time that, spending an hour a day in a shop working with your hands is more gratifying than 8 hours behind a like it's just being able to do something on your own, even if it's as simple as changing the oil and rotating the tires. Like there's satisfaction that comes from that, right?
They're 100%. I'll tell you one little thing for myself even is like, something like, I mean, maybe y'all are perfect and don't have bad days. I have off days. And say when I have off days and I'm making stuff and it's not feeling right and I'm just, my head's in the wrong spot or whatever's going on, it's like, or just the creativity is just, in a vacuum that day. It's not there. It's like one thing I like to do is like, I'll just sweep the floor, right? Pick up and clean tools. Because if I can do that successfully, then you start to get the series of wins under your belt, even if it's for an hour, right? It's like, all right, I got the floor swept, looking good. I got the hoses reeled up. I got the tools put, everything's clean. You're looking at it like, all right, let's take on the task. And because you kind of have this better headspace and your mentality is better, you really start moving through problems with a much more optimistic, much more positive view. And I find that personally, when my head's in a bad spot, the only work I can do is not good. And it's nothing that I want to show people or I want to sell or I want to talk about. But whenever I'm on a roll and things are happening, things are clicking, it's like I find that, I'm making the right moves, I'm making the right choices, and I'm really happy with the work that I'm doing. And so, so a lot of times I think that, like, you talk about that work with your hands, right? I think knocking things out with your hands, where this gratification, like when I mow my grass, right? It's like everyone mows the grass and it all looks the same cut, right? But whenever 3 hours ago it looked like the jungle and now it looks like, you look like an adult with a yard, it's like you go, yeah, that's what, it's like this instant gratification, It's not clicking on a picture on Instagram or something, but you look at it and you go, I sweat for the last 3 hours and this is what I have to show for it. It's like someone drives by and you stand in your front yard and you go, look at my front yard, It's the same thing with building something with your hands or assembling something, is I think that you get to step back at some point, whether it's 15 minutes or 15 hours or 15 weeks. You stand back and you go, yeah, no, that was worth my time. And I think you feel much more empowered because you took on and accomplished this task, no matter what it is physically. You kind of start looking at other problems and other tasks in your life and say, no big deal. If I can do this, I can do that. If I can do that, I can do the next thing. And I think that there's a lot of empowerment that's lost through manual labor. Whenever you do that, I think that physically, mentally, emotionally, you feel that much more capable of taking on the next thing. I could be alone in that. I'm not really sure.
Oh, no, I agree with you. My wife always gets upset because she can tell when I haven't went out and built anything for a while because I get like really cranky. And then like I get a Saturday, I get to go build something in my shop, machine it, plasma cut, weld, whatever. And all of a sudden I'm just like this happy person again. And maybe I didn't even build anything worth anything, but just the act of doing something creative night and day.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, man, it's like, you're so 100% right. And sometimes whatever you're doing, what you're doing is irrelevant. It's the fact that you did something, physical and it was successful, right? You engaged your hands, your eyes, and your brain. And I think that's the biggest thing, because any one of them, I don't think would give you the same return, but it really is this combination of eyes, hands, brain. I think is really where you step back at some point and you go, yep, that is the best damn birdhouse anyone's ever built. It's like, you have this moment where you're just like, you can quietly be very proud of yourself, for whatever level of work you've done. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's funny how as you get older, you start recognizing that stuff, right? Because when you're younger, it's like, yeah, I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. It's something I want to do. But then as you get older, you start to get more of that appreciation for it.
Well, and you realize some of the personal benefits of it too, because it's like when you're younger, it's because someone said they were going to, but they weren't. You try to show them you were going to be the cool guy. You wanted the attention, the girl, the whatever it was, right? You're trying to make a distinction between you and the other guys. Whatever the reason was, when you're younger, it's like, yeah, you thought it was cool, but when we're younger, we always think different things are cool. But then as you get older, it's really, you go, I enjoy spending this time. And I enjoy, what it is it's my Sudoku, right? It's my crossword. Whenever I go out in the shop, it's like I have problems. And that's the one thing everyone asks me about is like, how did you learn how to do all this stuff? Well, I just didn't believe there was anything that I couldn't do. Now, there's millions of things we've jumped into that I really didn't know how worked, but by the time I was done, I know how they work. I also know a couple ways they do not work. And so that's one of the things that I realized was that I enjoy the challenge. So people ask, well, about what you're good at. And I told them, I said, what we're good at is problem solving. As like whether it's a single car, a single project, or 5 years or a decade's worth of problems. What it is just we had a problem and we had to find a solution. And, and I really feel that some of our greatest achievements as humans have really been all in that same mode of thinking, was that we have a series of problems. Let's start with this one. Once we get this one done, we'll get this one. You know, and I personally like to believe, and I don't mean to make light of it, but leaving this planet, I think, is which, while is one of the craziest things we've ever attempted to do, one of the craziest things we've ever done, I think that largely it started with, we have a problem. And they say, here's something we want to do, and here's a whole bunch of big problems. Someone goes, I'll take that one. Someone goes, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. And you start chomping on it. And if you answer enough little problems and you solve enough little problems, you get to go do big stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. 100%. Yeah, because I put wiring kits in people's cars too, you know, on the side as part of that hobby. And like I've done a couple for Chevelles and things like that. And it's always funny. Yeah. The first kit I ever got, it was like, well, I've done wiring forever, you know, growing up working in a farm equipment dealership, that kind of stuff. I've repaired wires. I could do this, you know, and you put it in, you get it done, and it's like you hook the battery up, and a week later, there's no draw on the battery, and it's like, wow, that was pretty easy. And everyone's like, yeah, oh my God, how did you wire a vehicle? And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It just made sense. Like
yeah. Well, you know, it's one of those things, and here's what I find is that I don't think that it is that anyone is excluded. It's like, I think of it like welding, but it's like any of the mechanical parts or wiring, or you can move on to much more cerebral stuff that's not so much work with your hands. But you know, people look at it and they go, I don't even understand how. Well, it's like, because it's so new. It's like when you look at a house, there's so many components, but in a couple of months, they all get put in there. It's like, once you get to a point where you understand that the problem, whatever it is, has just the X amount of variables, right? And once you start identifying all of them, and then you start identifying what they need, like what their reason for existing is and what they need, then it's like all these complex problems, like with wiring a vehicle. You go, well, yeah, well, that has to go, obviously that has to go over there, and that has to do that. And if we send the power that way, we're going to have an issue here. And, you know, it's like, because you look at it, someone's like, you wired a whole vehicle, and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, it's just all the things needed this stuff, and they needed to have this communication, and yeah, it just all kind of seemed to make sense, you know? And it's like, the problem was they didn't understand enough of the variables. And I think so many things in our life are really that issue, or that when you look at it from 30,000 feet, you go, oh my goodness, this couldn't be a bigger mess, you know? But then once you get real close up to it, what you're missing is you're just missing the understanding of the components. Like once you start plugging in all the individual components, you go, oh, well, obviously we have to do this, and this is going to require this. And so I think that working on cars, oddly enough, I think is a big metaphor for a lot of bigger things in our lives, whether they're people to people or they're policies that involve people. But I really do think that cars are a great metaphor for so many things, because they require patience and understanding and education. And I think that we could all benefit from that.
Yeah,
I have to agree.
So I have a question for you, and I don't know if anyone's asked you before, but when you're building and designing and doing these kits, I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask anyway. Can you visualize how the kit and how things are going to lay out in your head when you look at the?
You know, so that's one thing about me, which I think is probably different with a lot of people. I think people that are like me, obviously, I think we all do the same thing, is like, I can see all kinds of components, modifications to a vehicle, you name it, whatever it is, like I can see it in my head. And so like, that's one thing about, like, with this program I have been working on, the Aaron Needs a Job, is I go experience all these big mechanical jobs, and I see all these things that I've never seen before, and you look at it, and I can imagine, like, oh, if the thing goes in there, like, there's got to be a snap ring behind that. Oh, the piston goes through. Oh my goodness, and that opens the valve, and so I can start seeing it all happen. It's like a little cartoon in my head. And so, like, when I approach building something, you know, I look at it and I go, all right, well, here's the problem. This is the solution for this component. What do we need to get there? And then I can start kind of seeing like a little cartoon in my head, like, all right, that thing has to go there and that thing has to go here, and that'll pass through that. And I just see these little hand sketches like in my head, and then it kind of becomes a cartoon. And then so what I'm trying to do with my hands is replicate what I see in my mind. And, you know, some people can have an image in their head and they can draw it out on a piece of paper. It's actually easier for me to make a 3D representation, to actually build the thing, than it is for me to draw a good picture of it. And so I do see them there in my head, like, just like it really exists, or would.
So I thought that was the case, because I've had this thought for a long time, where, like, when I got into manufacturing and blueprints and all that stuff, from a professional career, when you started doing 2D, you look at the guys that built the B-17s and all that good stuff, and they drew all that stuff on those great big huge sheets of paper. Those guys all could see what that was going to be in real life and then converted it to 2D, right? And today, everything is pretty much in 3D. I can do things in 3D in my phone. And I think where my assumption is what a lot of people are missing with the mechanical ability is they no longer have to use that part of their brain to visualize it in their head, right? Because everything they see is already presented to them in a 3D realistic type layout. And like when I talk to Jim and Mike Ring, the Ring brothers, those guys are very much that way like you, where they can see what it's going to be before they build it. And like when I design stuff, I always see, I can look at a structure, I can look at a car, I can look at the stance, and I can be like, okay, well, if it had this and this and this, and oh, this color would go great with that, and I see how it's going to fit. And people are like, I don't know what you just said. And
sure, yeah, I mean, it's like, so I equate it to the Peanuts parents. It's like normal people, or like, because I consider all of us, gearheads and stuff, kind of some weird level, chemically deficient, and so it's like what everyone else hears is wah 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 wah, and what's funny is so when I say, when I talk about either industry people or people that want to say speak the language, it's no matter what you're talking about, it's people that understand the shorthand. Because it's like everyone's capable of understanding, but the people that get whatever it is you're talking about, if they understand the shorthand, we're talking the same language. And so it's easy to lose people, and even people that I'm around like on a daily that don't really do what I do. It's like sometimes real quick, you can see kind of the gloss in the eyes, and like they're just being nice and listening to you at some point, and you're like, oh yeah, I lost you, huh?
Yeah. So you mentioned your TV show. I watch it, and there was you went out to Air Tractor.
Oh yeah, yes sir.
Yeah. And my father-in-law is good friends with the guys at Air Tractor because he's actually a crop duster in Western Kansas. So
right on.
Yeah, so he does the whole AMP and all that stuff. When we were watching the episode, and my wife, I think she humors me sometimes with all the car shows I make her watch.
Sure.
Building shows, and when the Air Tractor stuff came up, she got really excited about that because that's what her dad flies down there all the time to get all this maintenance done. When you were at Air Tractor and you were flying the plane that they had there, what was that actually like? Because my father-in-law has taken me on test runs in a passenger plane, but he doesn't have a 2-seater spray plane, so I don't know what it's like to ride in something that big.
So let me tell you, I'm a huge airplane nut, and I love airplanes. And so I've always thought that these were kind of, suited to purpose, but kind of a dumpy looking airplane. But then, it's just because I'm driving next to him on the road, or I see him, and like, boy, the cab's in a really strange configuration and blah, 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 blah. But you realize that all these things are because of necessities, why they have to be that way. But when you're driving by, you don't think about it. And then as I got to spend the day there and really learn about the airplane, like I had a greater appreciation for the plane itself and why everything was the way it was on it, and the engineering behind it, and how they ended up just developing the whole thing. But really, none of the learning about it really could compare to flying in it. Because like of all the different types of aircraft that I've flown in or even had the opportunity to fly a little bit, there was nothing quite like this, because it's not like sexy, fast, cool like a jet or like an extra or like, like a Red Bull, like an air race plane. It's kind of big and lumbery, but it doesn't move that way. And the one thing I was so impressed with is that once we dumped our payload or the water out of the hopper, I remember at one point we're going across here and we're probably 5 or 6 feet off the deck and doing about 140 miles an hour. And we're going across this field and there's a road and there's big power line. And I go, and we're jamming across there, and I go, well, if I was flying, I'd probably pull up right here and then go a little way. And I go, oh, I would definitely have pulled up here. And then I go, well, maybe we were going underneath the power line. And then about that time, he just yanks back on it, and just the rate of climb was so impressive. And the motor that's in it, because you think about what the potential weight for the aircraft is. So the 850 horse in these things is an absolute monster. I was really floored by the amount of power that it had. Not that it was incredibly fast, but while this thing is empty, its rate of climb was just kind of hard to understand, because I'd been in aerobatic airplanes making 200, 230 horsepower, but this thing making 50. And it's also the first time I'd been like, well, other than a Pilatus, had been in like a turboprop front, front engine. And it was incredible, man. I'll say that. Like, it turns harder than I thought. Like, I thought for a big square wing airplane, I thought it would be, kind of like Dumbo in the sky. And that is not the case at all. I was surprised at how hard it would do everything, how hard it would bank, how it would climb. It was just, everything about it was just pissed off and mean,
Yeah, when I'm around my father-in-laws, it always sort of seems like it's like a hot rod, sort of. It doesn't look like it can do anything, but it does.
Yeah, that's the wild part. Yeah, is when it sits there, it doesn't just exude this. It doesn't look like it's super fast. It's not just like Mondo sexy, but it's like really powerful, which is in itself is a lot of fun. I mean, it's like anything with way too much motor is a lot of fun. But it's like, I was really surprised, not just on the raw power part of it, but how well the airplane performed, because it just doesn't look like it would do that. But that was the one thing I was really impressed with, just how hard the plane would turn for its size. And it was an absolute hoot.
Awesome. Yeah, my father-in-law is coming out for Good Guys here next week in Colorado, and I got that one recorded on the DVR. I was going to show it to him because he'd get a big kick out of that, because he's been working with Air Tractor forever. So.
Oh yeah, it really was. I met so many great people, and what a great company. I really was impressed through and through. And on my little journey, for the AK Needs a Job thing, is I've met so many proud Americans. And it's like jobs you wouldn't think of, and and the pay's all over the place. But I've met so many different people that are like third generation doing the same job, which I couldn't be a bigger fan of multi-generational work, about passing it on. And it's like, you don't have to come from somewhere to be really good at it. But I always wonder, it's like when you're third generation and it's all you've known, it's all your family's known, or it's like, I think that you have to be good. You have to have a leg up on everybody else. It's in your genes, it's in your blood.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So I got one more question about your show. When you were down in
Sure.
Louisiana doing the concrete in the river.
The mat laying.
Yes. So you built the bar to move those concrete pads over, and then you were doing the tying system. How much work was it moving those pads around? Because those things sound like they're huge.
Like 3,000 pounds on a group, and so 3,000 pounds, and then like to be honest, they're all on rollers. They move pretty good with a big wrecking bar. They move pretty good, but you got to remember, you're doing that a few thousand times a day. It's like you understand, well, most of those guys on there are twice my size. But but that being said, though, there are also some little guys out there. That is hard work. It's exceptionally hard work. But it's like, you think about one of the things about rewarding work is, what are one of the things that they're doing? People don't know, and they don't think about it. And if you look at the charts historically of the last 100 years of the Mississippi, people don't realize how prone to moving rivers are, period, anywhere in the world. And then especially one that's that powerful. It's like it can walk itself around wherever it pleases, and there's not much you're going to do to stop it. And so when you talk about one of these great tales, these great military tales, well, one of them is holding the mighty Mississippi back, showing it where it will go. And so the Corps of Engineers has done this amazing job, and done it for over 100 years of controlling the Mississippi. And anytime there's an issue or a levee breach, or someone really wants to point fingers, like, wait a second, you don't realize what they've held back. It's like, because of this one thing, you want to vilify somebody. Well, you don't even realize the amount of work that they have done. And I thought, what a unique way of doing this. And then, you look at it and you watch and you go, oh, it's pretty cool and it's neat. And we only have a few minutes to tell a tale. When I was talking with some of the engineers, the things they take into account to build this was, this is, it's not rocket science, but it is like heavy math, and so much stuff that they're working on continually. While the guys are tying the mats, and while they're sinking the mats, what's actually being monitored and being put in the water is really, really wild. And what the risk to doing it wrong is to the crew, to the barge, to the equipment, and the risk to the levee system to do it wrong. And so I was really impressed with, but there's a lot of things they don't talk about, like how they lay it, how far out, the length, the angle they tilt it and they drop it in at. There's all these little stuff, and they can all go wrong in a moment's notice. And so it's a heavy job that people don't know about, and it makes sure that their house isn't living inside the Mississippi River.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was pretty wild when I watched that, because you think about all the flooding that's happened in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, that
Sure.
all ends up down there at the bottom. And you think about
Absolutely
how bad the flooding is, and then trying to lay those mats while the water is coming down that fast and that hard. It's just like, it's to me, it just seemed like a moving target that they're trying to
Oh,
accomplish.
I mean, it really was wild to see the power of it. And then, there's all the mechanical parts that were super impressive. And, that was one of the things where they asked me about it, and I approved kind of the shows, and I said, yeah, it's like, that does sound cool. And so we went down there, and even stepping onto the barge, I really didn't know what I was going to experience on it. And then the more time I spent on there, the more fascinating. It's like for every question I had answered, I had 3 more questions. It just seemed like once you know a little bit more, you start understanding like how much you don't know. And that's, I'll tell you, that's really been a hallmark of my career, wherever it's been, is that every time I learn something new, I realize how much I have left to learn. And it's really kind of like where you're learning stuff and you think like you'd be getting like bigger and stronger. And then you learn stuff and you're just like, oh crap, there's a lot I don't know. You realize just how it's deflating a little bit. Like the more education you get, you're just like, I'm never going to know all the stuff I feel like I need to know.
Yeah, 100%. I talk to people every day, and it's just like, wow, I really need to step up my game because you just taught me something that I feel like I should have known.
Yeah, it is, and it's and I really do kind of wonder, about from a society standpoint. It's like it does seem like sometimes we, not across the board, but it does seem like we value some of the wrong things sometimes. And like when it comes to education, it's like I really feel like every day I wake up, it's just like I need answers for all these thousands of questions. I know maybe I'll answer one of them today, but the deal is like I just can't stand thinking that like I might get in a conversation and have no idea what they're talking about. It's like that would be really like hurtful, inside, to me personally. And so one of the things is like just this wild fascination. It's like I have to assume that everyone, kind of has that. And so it's kind of one thing that I was trying to for my show. I was hoping to kind of fill for at least for a little bit is like just answer questions. Some of those questions people didn't know they had, because every one of these places I've gone and I've learned something. I learn a lot about the people, but I learned something about how something works. Sometimes I'm like, that's exactly how I thought that would work. Or I look at it and go, you got to be kidding me. This is how you do this. It's always such a big experience just to start to have some understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, John, you could ask a question. I'm just, there's so many things to talk about. I'm sort of taking over the conversation.
Sure. Well, tell me a little bit about some of your staff, because I tell you what, I found some of the people that I met in your, at your shop to be really interesting. And one of those was Jonathan Monsieur.
Yep. Yeah. Jonathan's been with me. He's a long time.
Yeah. What does Jonathan do there?
Well, that's kind of what Jonathan doesn't do. Jonathan's really we have such a small staff. It's not like we have like names on the outside of our offices or anything, but Jonathan's kind of my operations manager. He handles everything from booking stuff for me and for making sure I'm where I'm supposed to be to whatever, to making sure that we have the right chemicals on the shelf and stuff like that. So John, while he's not going to go out and cut and weld and build like myself or some of the other staff, but it's like John really makes sure that we have the right things. And that's everything from dealing with technology to logistics to material to chemicals. And I'll tell you, it's like, as far as like I think a lot of people might have known him as the parts guy over at Gas Monkey when we were over there doing that. But ultimately, so much more. One of the biggest things is Jonathan understands what our capabilities are. Like that we don't need a thing to be for that thing. Like if I say I need something, there's just an aspect of it that I need that I'm going to cut out, remove, or machine away. And so that's one thing that makes John really good at is he understands like what our capabilities are. And so it's like I don't have to explain much, to him. I say, hey, I want this, now I'm going to do this with it. And it's just like, yeah, he's able to convey that to the people that he needs to get, whether it's hard parts, soft parts, or or it's electronic or whatever. And so it's really, it's like my staff really makes it possible for me to go do the things that I do or the things that we do. And that's one thing as I've gotten older and the more time I spend in the industry is that when I was younger, I felt like I can do everything. And one thing you notice as you get older is your body it says no to some of that when you think that you can do everything. And then ultimately there's just so many hours in the day and there's so many different aspects of the job. And I realized like, Jonathan's so much more political than I am. It's like he knows how to talk to people better. I'm really good about getting people excited, but then otherwise everything's kind of black and white for me. And with John, John's able to like kind of work through something with somebody, and that really is a big help for me. And so John really makes a lot of things we do that are very, very possible, and he maintains a lot of our relationships with our vendors, and which is, you know, it was hard to do with, you know, it seems like every day we're on this planet, like it seems like the days get shorter and shorter, and the ability to get the work done gets harder and harder. And so it takes a great team, and you know, Robin and Rachel do such a great job, and you know, and I've over the last couple of years been blessed with so many, you know, guys with big hearts and big abilities.
Your staff has been great to me on my visits down there, and Jonathan really just stuck out because he was really helpful. Took me through the shop, spent a lot of time with me. Well, you did too as well, and I enjoyed my visit. It was wonderful to meet all your people.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, it was a wonderful experience having you down there at the shop, and like I was referring to earlier, you know, yeah, spending some time with you was one of those moments when, you know, when you realize how much you have to learn. And it's like when you'd be talking, explaining stuff to us and doing a beautiful job, and I would just be like on the edge of hanging on by my fingernails onto the spoiler on the back of the car of you know, John's education into how to run the SolidWorks machine. And it's this like, it's always inspiring to be around somebody like, I've got to learn more so I can just hang here. You know what I mean? And, you know, it's like, it takes a great team, and that comes from education and from your vendors, from your partners, as well as your internal team. But I've come to the point where I realized that nothing big ever happens without having the right team.
Yes. Hats off to you too. You've got a great one.
Well, thanks so much. With Jonathan and me, we've been homeboys for 22 years now, and so it's been a long one in the making.
And you know, it seems that way too.
Yeah, we understand each other pretty well, I think.
That's really good to see.
Yeah, I would agree. It comes across that way. Yeah. Through any communication, it's like you know, you two are both on the same wavelength.
I'll tell you, in teams, it's like, you know, I don't have a long history of developing the biggest, best teams and producing some of the wildest outcomes. You know, I don't have a long history at that. But one thing I've realized is just how much different perspectives bring to the table. But the big thing is I think that this is the unifying factor, at least what I feel is the unifying factor, that everyone wants to end up in the same spot. Because at that point, it's like anytime someone wants to make a change or wants to suggest a new possibility, it's like they're doing it from the same emotional point that you're at. I want to get here, and I just see it differently. And it's so much easier to understand and accept people and people's ideas if you believe that they want to be in the exact same place. So when you know that they want to be in the same place, it's like everything you're hearing it's not an attack, it's not a correction, it's just really an alternative to it. And I think that's one of the big things, is really believing that everyone on the team wants to end up in the same place. If that's the case, then I think it's so much easier to accept possibilities, criticism, and suggestions.
I have to agree with that. I think that's beautifully said.
Oh,
well
yeah.
said.
Yeah, because you look at a lot of companies that have come out with, you know, they're like the flash in the pan companies, right? They come out with this great idea and they put something together, and 3 years later they're gone, and you look around and all their key people now work at competing places, and it's because they got so far and then they all had different ideas on where it needed to go, and they couldn't actually take the next step.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I've come to believe that that's it, is that like with anything that you do, even if it's a 20-minute task in the garage or in the house or something, is that you have to visualize like the end, like what is my end goal? Because if you set out on a road trip and you don't know where you're going to go to, it's like you could try to go to Atlanta on your way by going to Albuquerque. You know what I mean? If you didn't know where you were going to go. So I think like knowing what you hope to accomplish is really a big aspect of getting started. But the other part of it is I think that if you know where you want to go, the setbacks and the failures and the stubbing your toes, I think that they have less effect whenever you know where you want to go, because you're still headed there. You just had to detour a little bit, or you had to take a break or something like that. But the goal is still in front of you, and you're still closer than you used to be. And I think that it's important if everybody realizes that we have a goal to this, and this is where we want to go. I think how you get there starts to become a little bit less of the problem. once everyone knows, and once you know, even personally, it's like, this is where I hope to end up. And once you keep gunning for it, I think that the problems kind of like they stop affecting you as much.
Couldn't agree more. It's one of the 7 habits of highly successful people.
What, to keep going in the face of, to persevere?
Yeah, to begin with the end in mind.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Know what you're trying to achieve before you set out on down that path. And just like you said, have everybody focused on that same goal. And then, anytime an issue comes up, it's not personal. Everybody's just playing kind of what if and throwing different suggestions around there. And it really promotes a high level of teamwork.
Oh, I really do agree. It's like, yes, that's exactly right. Is that anytime there's an issue, it's not personal, it's procedural. And it's like, how do we adjust the procedure? And it's like, and no one takes it as a personal attack, because it's like, because you're willing to, say it's your idea that's not working, if your biggest goal is to get there and your idea is not producing it, you're more than happy to move to the new possibility and work on it, because it might get you where you want to go.
And I've seen when people are motivated that way, I've seen that there's no task during that journey that they won't gladly do, because they keep
And I mean, it's like, and also, and it's even for ego-driven people, it's also the same way, even inside of a team, I think, and there may be some limitations to this, but it's like, because someone wants to be, even if you don't going to get all the glory, right? You want to be a part of the successful team. It's like you're still hunting for that. And the other thing is, oftentimes you need to have the rest of your team be successful. So it's much more of an incentive to not cut to tie your teammates' shoelaces together or to backstab them, because if you don't have their help, their pull, it's going to be harder for you to succeed. And so I do believe that level of motivation is paramount.
Yes.
I'm obviously, being from Nebraska, college football is a big thing, right? Just like Texas. And I was watching a deal this last week with college football kicking off, and they were interviewing Nick Saban from Alabama, and he was talking about how the difference between 30 years ago and today is 30 years ago you could just tell someone to do it, and they would do it because they understood there was a hierarchy of leadership, right? And in today's world, the way that you get people on board is you now have to explain, yes, we need to do this, but a global understanding of why it is important gets people further than the old way of just, top-down marching order type scenario. And as I've thought about that, and I've, sort of looked around, it's like, yeah, lots of companies that are successful, everybody down to the person taking out the trash at night, all understand why they're there and why what they're doing is important to contribute to the overall goal. And I think that fits into what we're talking about here of, if everybody's on the same page, they also sort of understand the why this is important, which removes a little bit of the ego component. Not all of it. I mean, we're all prideful people, but I think some of that plays into it today too, is how we communicate versus how the traditional communication path went.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and I've felt that there are some benefits to be noted on the traditional, the former method. I think one of the biggest things is that it kind of promotes streamlinedness. Like, I think you're able to move much quicker when there's not a debate about it or a question or a deeper understanding. But I think that ultimately, people's desire to get it done is much higher whenever they do understand the role that they play in the success. And I think that's it's definitely. Well, I love traditional, thoughts and thinking sometimes, but we live in the here and now, and I myself am very much of the group of people that just has to know how it works. Like, so if someone wants me to do something, it's like I have to know why it is you want it, and it's like I don't even need to agree with it. I just need to know that you have some sound reasoning. And it's like, because I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to be involved in something that is just wishful thinking, kind of. And so that being said, it's like, as long as I feel like someone has a plan, it's like if they can convince me that they have thought this out and they do have a plan, okay, great, sure, whatever you want to do. And so that's just the thing, is like, I just need the validation from them that they have put the intellectual time into it, that, oh, you do have a plan, this is worth something, this is, okay, all right, cool, all right, let's do it. So I do agree. I do agree with the modern take on it, and having people understand what the value of the work that they're doing is, like what it actually affects. And I think that no matter what level you're at, if you realize that there is a value to what you're doing, that you feel good about doing it, you accomplish something that made someone else's job possible or life easier or on and on and on, that you weren't just doing a task because someone asked you to, that you're doing it because it does need to be done.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like when I was running a company, I used to tell the guys, like, look, we have this deadline, we have to come up here. So therefore, we break it down, we got to do this and this and this. This is why it's important for us, to have a higher quality and all that stuff. And I would explain it. But then there were still times where it was like, okay, your welding area is a mess. Like, you just have to clean it up. Like, come on.
Yeah.
There are certain points where it's like, you still have to do the basic
Oh yeah, you can't escape the cat wrangling to some degree.
Yeah. But anyway, I know it's a little bit of a sidetrack thing, but I found myself over the years as I've gotten older, maybe it's from running departments and things like that, but I find myself more of a student of how people react to, to different scenarios, right? And like how understanding how the people are motivated and what drives them to get the most out of them, to me is a pretty fascinating thing from a human perspective.
Dude, I'll tell you, man, it's like I learn something new about it every day. And, just like to throw back to something I said earlier, it's like I think that's, part of getting older, at least it has been for me, is it's weird, when I was younger, you didn't realize all the cliches that you were involved in, like that you were, right? And as you get older and kind of a little bit more calmed down about things, you realize that everyone responds. They have they work differently, and they have different reasons for being there. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things I've ever tried to do is try and understand how to motivate people when I'm at work to want the same things that I want, or to understand how they're seeing or perceiving a problem. And I tell you, man, I think understanding and working and motivating and running people, by far the hardest thing. It's like, cause the metal doesn't talk back when it doesn't want to move. We just get a bigger hammer, we get a bigger machine, and we just exert our will upon it. But that sometimes with people is counterproductive. It's really a difficult, chess game. And so that's one thing that machines have taught me. People are very difficult. They're very rewarding when you get it right, but it's so frustrating when you don't know what the tools are to use. And that's, there's like anything in the shop. And it's like my world is in the shop. Like I can't talk about being in a high rise or a big building or big boardrooms, but I do know about being in the shop. And it's like when you have the wrong tool, you can take a 10-minute job and turn it into 2 weeks. When you have the right tool, you can take a 2-week job and turn it into 10 minutes. And so it's like whenever dealing person to person, boss to employee or coworker to coworker, it's like it's really, really difficult to know what tool to use. And if you're unaware of this tool, how in the world would you know? And so we're kind of our own worst enemy on what we don't know, on how we don't know how to operate with each other. But I have found that running people is the hardest thing, and it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult for me. It's like my communication with metal is a lot better than it is with people.
Amen.
Yeah. I got to the point where I used to, if I was hiring like a welder or a painter or laser operator or whatever, in the interview, I would just flat out ask them, like, what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning? And most of them would be like, well, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, you could wake up in the morning and you could stay in bed, but what motivates you to get out of bed? Is it your family? Is it your kids? Is it your money? Is it, what is it? A better car? And it was funny how many people had never been asked that before, but it was also equally as funny how many people had an answer, but had never been asked, because some people would be like, oh, well, I get out of bed for my family. And it's like, okay, so I know if you become an employee, I can't have you work 90 hours a week because your family, you have to have a work-family balance, right?
So you've now told me what your primary concern is, and if work comes in the way of the primary concern, then work's going to drop by the wayside. Yeah, you kind of learn where the boundaries are with another human. It's like we call them an employee and say there's the obligations, but it's like all humans have their fences set at different levels.
Yeah, and some people will work 90 hours a week because their goal is a better car, a bigger house, whatever their idea of success is, right? And for those people, they're willing to sacrifice a personal life for a work schedule.
Sure, and the other thing is like you know, and it is really different. I mean, trying to decipher what people mean when they say things. But it's like, I think that in hot rodding, I don't know if it's across the board, but I think that as you find people that do more work or sometimes find more success, I think I feel like one of the things that you find is you ask them that question, like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Because I want to be better. I want to be more qualified tonight when I go to bed than when I got out of bed this morning. I want to know something I didn't know. I want to do something better. It's like, no matter how good your welds look, no matter how solid they are, they could always be better. You could always run a longer bead. It's like when you're running a mill, it's like you could always just get better at those things. And some people, and I find that maybe I've been lucky to surround myself with people that think this way, but it's like whether they're self-taught or they're formally educated, it's like the people that I enjoy being around are people that realize that no matter what they're doing and what level they're at, there can always be a next level. They can always get better. And that's the thing, is they don't ever want to be standing at the bar next to someone they think is better than them. So it's that A-type competitive personality. It's like, I realize I'm not the best now, but I'd like for it to not always be that way. Say they start chasing that dream. And that's one of those things we talk about with the end in mind, is that if the first end of the goal is to make it till sundown, right? And so making it till sundown, so we've gotten the survival down pretty good. So the next part is how do I become being a better me, whatever that is. And if you identify as, if you're a welder, if someone says, who are you and what do you do? And you point to your body of work as to who you are, then you and I are really of the same mindset. When someone asks, what did you leave behind? What was the reason for you being here? So far in my life, it's like, there are things that I enjoy doing that make me happy. But what I would point to this work, and the work really led me to relationships. And I've long since believed that the thing that I get most out of the industry that I'm in is the personalities. I think the greatest people I've met, or I have in my life, I've met through the things that bring me joy, because that we understand each other on a chemical level, like we're into the same things. And so I find that people, when you ask what gets you out of bed in the morning, I find the people that say, I need to be better than I was when I got up. I have to learn something new today. I have to be better. It's like people that are driven that way are hard to stop.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
It's funny you mention that, because I've been accused by former employers of being super negative and never happy with anything. And and it's funny.
That is the most defeating thing. I've had people tell me the same thing, like, well, you're just never happy with anything. That's not true. I'm happy with it up to this end. And now that it's done, I realize what could have been done better. It's not that I'm unhappy with it. I just wish I had done better the first time.
Yeah. Well, and I can appreciate it for 5 minutes, and it's like, okay, now I've checked that level. Now I need to go to the next level, and then I need to go to the next level. And it's like
that's 100% it. I see pretty much everything. So you get done with something, and someone goes, "Oh, hey, that's really nice." You're like, I didn't realize, like, if I had kind of bent that way, I probably could have made it with one less part, or I could have done this, or if I had flipped this over, you wouldn't see it. Like, I just, like, in my head, I didn't realize that I could countersink that, slide that underneath the other part, and capture the nut. It's like you're looking at it just like, crap, why didn't I see this before?
Yeah, and that's why I've had so many hot rods, because I'll build something for a while, and then I'm like, all I see are things that I could have done better next time. So it's like, okay, get rid of that car, get another car, bring it in. Okay, now I'll start over and I'll do that. And it's funny. It's funny how that process works. And I agree with you, like-minded people. Like, John and I have known each other for 3 years now, and people in our company swear that John and I have known each other for a decade, because
Yes.
Oh, but if you're on the same wavelength, and I've long believed this. I mean, maybe y'all have the same experience, but I've met people that 3 minutes into knowing them, it's like you're not sure how many decades you've known this person. Like, your humor's on the same level, like your problem solving is like in the same process. It's like you kind of, like, when y'all talk about things, like you find value in the same sorts of stuff. When you look at something, the first things jump out at you are the same. It's like, so that's kind of one of those things. Like, I do run across people that I call, on the same wavelength. It's like we're the same color of light, and so that's kind of the thing. Like, when I run into those people, it's like, we can be homeboys.
Yeah.
It's sharing a common passion. If you share a common passion, you're just so bound to each other. You understand each other in such a way, because it's kind of like shooting for that same goal, but doing it naturally. Like, when I first met Michael, I could tell within 10 minutes that manufacturing and creating with his hands and creating things was the most important thing to him, or one of the most important things. And that's how it is with me. And so it's that passion and it's that commonality that is always a common denominator between us.
I really couldn't agree more. It's like, and it really is like, I find people that no matter how vast the physical differences or locations or whatever, it's a thought process that you really kind of attach to, is that you go, oh, they see problem solving the same way I do. So now it's not like, oh, I have to have a conversation. You're encouraged to get a conversation because you want to hear their take on it, because it might be like yours. It may, and maybe it's a selfish thing. It's like, oh, like, I think this person sees it like I see it, but from a different perspective. Tell me how you see it. And then it's like this weird little tidbit of validation. And then when you see something from that other perspective, like, oh, well, hey, you know what? It's like, it's so much easier to take it, because you're like, I like this person. It's like, they see things like I see. I like their problem solving method. And then you go, all right, I'll buy that. Like, that's a pretty solid idea. It's like, you're just so much more open to it. But I mean, I absolutely love when collaboration is on, man, I find that the doors open up.
Yeah.
Oh, they do. Oh my God.
Because I think when you're on the same wavelength too, the barrier of people being offended by ideas in a discussion, like a real discussion, go way down.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree completely.
Yeah.
It really does, because, you know, we're learners. We love to learn. Like you said, what did I learn today? You know, I'll be in a discussion with Michael on someday and on days, and it's like, man, I did not know that. That is really insightful.
Yeah. There's, I think it's one of the greatest feelings is to take this piece of information, doesn't matter what it is, and then digest it and go, I feel so much more proud of myself. I feel so much more empowered whenever I learn something. And sometimes it's like I learn something, I go, oh, we need to not forget that. We need to put that in the file, like a little close to the front. And it's like, I feel much more empowered. And when I forget things, I'm so angry with myself. But one of the things, like I tell my guys, like, no matter how much you know something, look it up. It's like because it's more important to be accurate. It's more important to be successful than to be proud of yourself for remembering it. But like, it's just this, I appreciate myself more when I learn more. That's kind of the thing. When I feel better about myself, I do better work. I'm better to people around me. And I think that's kind of I don't know if it works for everyone else, but whenever I feel like I'm moving forward, like I'm being successful, it's like I want everyone around me to be as successful or more. It's like I really want to keep moving the boat faster and faster and faster. When I don't, I have very little care for how people feel about their position and like what their, how they feel about their education that day and where they are, So I find that always moving forward is kind of one of for me, it affects my mental health in a great degree. It's like whenever I feel like I'm being successful, I'm being positive, I'm learning, I'm growing as a human, as a builder, as a business owner, any of these other things, I feel like it's far easier for me to be that more motivating for people around me. And I just kind of, like I said, you go through the industry or go through life, and I've just kind of found that to be true about myself and about working with other people.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm exactly that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I'm not creating, building, moving forward, I am a horrible person to be around because I am very miserable from a mental state.
Dude, I'll tell you, I know a lot of people that are builders, and not everybody in the same medium, but they're builders. They're creatives, right? They see something and it has to be willed into existence. You know what I mean? And so that being said, it's like everybody suffers from the same thing when they're not building. That they are kind of. It's very hard for them. Like it's almost depressive, to be able to have thoughts and be in a position where they can't turn them into something, or they can't forward them or work on them, or it's like that. That's just kind of a really icky feeling to be in. It's like where you kind of, it's almost a little self-defeating. It's like, unless you can't go out and if you can't go out to the shop and do something, wherever the shop or whatever the shop is, if you can't go create, it's like sometimes you just kind of have this buildup. And for me recently, it's like I said, I bought a new shop and I kind of got out of the rent race, but it took everything I had. And so it was kind of one of those life happened. It kind of put us on ice for the last few months, like last 4 months. And so I haven't been able to do a lot. I can do stuff here at the house, but my team's back at the shop and we haven't been able to get it back on its feet yet. And we're finally there. And so the other day, Casey called me from, used to work with us, and he's got a truck going to SEMA and asked me if I could come help on it. And it was really one of the most therapeutic things for me in the last couple months was to go over there and to build sheet metal parts and weld and work on the truck and and hang out with on top of all that, hang out with my friend for a little bit. And so that was it was really, really helpful for me to get and bend some metal and make some stuff and, and burn some rod. And so it was, I find that I'm like that. And I have to assume that a lot of other people are like that, but their burning rod and bending metal is different. You know what I mean? It's different things. But I think that we all need a project, and we all need to be successful to some degree at it in order to move everything forward down the field.
Yeah. The world needs more hobbies for people.
No, I'll tell you, I had this conversation months and months ago. And so it's like, so I'm 37, and my friend was a similar age. And he was saying, like, I feel like all the people around me have no hobby. They don't do anything. It's like they come home and it's like indulge in, self-medication, which I'm sure we all do from time to time. But the deal is, like, it's like that's their hobby and consuming entertainment. It's like people don't invest the time, whether it's gardening or it's woodwork or it's learning how to do origami or do engines or motorcycles or cars or spaceships or, electrolysis test in their garage. It's like people, it's like you just said, I don't feel like people, it's like none of the friends I have, they get off work, they change clothes, they go to the bar, that's their extracurricular activity. And believe me, I'm a big fan of the bar. I absolutely am. But it's like I do it once I feel like I've done something and it's worth a celebration, then that's where we go. But, but the thing is, like, I have to get done with something before I turn the lights out, pull up my little chair and sit in front of the project, whatever it is, if it's a car frame or motor mounts or rack mounts or a seat mount. We're building something to look at and go, yeah, no, that'll do, pig. That's what I'm after. It's like, and once you've done that and you give yourself a little pat on the back, now we can go indulge in these other things.
Yeah. Well, it's, I get obsessive about stuff. So right now, in my mind, I am obsessed with building, taking a 2-ton, like C60 truck, drop 12 valve in it, get it on the ground, maybe rat rod it. I haven't quite figured out if I'm going to keep it like a farm truck type thing or what yet. But like all of my free time right now is obsessed over how I want it to look, what the stance is going to be. I got a 12 valve lined up. Like I don't even have a truck yet, but I already got a 12 valve.
Oh yeah. I understand completely, because it's the same thing. It's like I get obsessive about the planning in my mind, and like you can ask me about this future project, the car I have in my mind. I can tell you what the connectors look like on the engine harness, right? And where I'm going to put them and where the coil mounts are going to go. And like what the bulkhead for the steering column is going to look like, where I'm going to make the exhaust hangers, how I'm going to do them different than the last one. It's like all this, I can tell you all these little details that I've thought about them 1,000 times. Now, it doesn't mean when you get down there and you actually start doing it, you don't make some tweaks, but it's like, we talk about visualizing the parts you're going to make. It's like, you start seeing them all in your head,
Yeah, and that's what I find when I talk about hobbies. That's what I find is very interesting, because like, I'll go to the gym or I'll meet casual acquaintances, and they're like, oh, what are you into? And I'm like, oh, I build, I like hot rods and machining and manufacturing and all that stuff. And
I make stuff.
Yeah, and they just sort of like, oh, so you're sort of one of those Neanderthal guys, right? Like I go golf.
Oh, and what's sad is like, is while you're joking, you may not be entirely, is that I still get that, and I have a hard time with that. It's like people want to attribute more, for myself, more success, if you will, right? Air quotes, like due to being on TV. And for me, it's like the things I've learned how to do. It's like it's the education that has afforded me, that where I've gotten to go. And it's like people still think if you work with your hands, like somehow you're less qualified, right? And to be honest, there are some jobs that are repeat manual labor, right? But where I find one of the most rewarding things is when you get to engage your hands, and your brain. It's like whenever you can,
Yes.
make something that you figure all the angles, you figure all the problems, and you work through them in your head, and then you use these little stumps connected to your shoulders, and you're able to produce a thing that didn't exist before. It's like, I don't know how other people measure their success. Like if they work in an office or they handle money or something like that, I have to assume it's by the amount of money on their check at Friday. And for me, it's like my success is like, while we all want more money, it makes things more comfortable. Ultimately, I've had a bad week if none of my projects went the way I wanted to, regardless of the money. It's like, if I've had a good week, that means I'm hitting on all eight, and things are happening. I mean, stuff is working. Like I feel like I'm successful. I had good ideas. They all came to fruition. It's like, for me, it's like that's kind of the satisfaction, is knowing that the things I created, the things that came out of my mind, actually work. It's not, the money's nice, but it's completely it's a byproduct of we like to think having successful ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to a guy who builds cars, and he's like, "Oh, you're still into cars?" I was like, "Yeah, they keep paying me every 2 weeks, so I keep spending all my money on cars." It's like, it's like the one is the means for the other. It doesn't mean that I don't care, I'm not passionate, because I am in everything I do, because I always joke I don't get out of bed for second place, right? What motivates me is to be the best at what I decide to do, whatever that is.
Yeah, and if today wasn't that day, guess what? There's tomorrow.
Yes, yeah, but getting back to the hobby thing, what I think is unique is, for some of us, like us three on the call, we have that obsessive passion about something, and I think where there's less hobbies and people don't have the hobbies is, I think there's a couple things. I think, for one, some people see the obsessive thing as a bad thing, right? Because that means you give up everything else, versus the understanding that the passion is what makes my life a better life. People relate obsession to a bad thing versus a positive.
Which totally blows my mind, because that is the root of all subculture, and subculture is what makes this salad work. You know what I mean? It's like if we really were all the same, I can't imagine how absolutely disgusting this planet would be. We're not, and that's the greatest thing, is that we all see, feel, think, and create differently. And that's what's so awesome, is to look at someone else's take on anything and go, well, that moves me in a way I didn't expect. I didn't really expect to feel this way about that. It's very cool. And it's like, I think that, those differences, I think to be able to express ourselves differently is really kind of one of the greatest things that we all share with each other.
Oh, 100%. I agree with that. I like the fact that everybody has a different look on life and a different outtake, because it would really suck if we were all the same.
It would be boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, very much so. But we've went a little over our hour, and I know you're a busy man, so I could talk with you for days if about this stuff, man. It's so awesome chatting with you. I really appreciate your insight, and I'm a personal huge fan, obviously, of what you guys are doing. So I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, we're all into the same things, and it's like, John coming down and spending the time with us. It's like, with the SolidWorks, it's like in all of the digital drafting and stuff. We talk about, you asked me earlier on the conversation about seeing things, and it's like, and then we talked about like kind of some ego driven and some motivations, and it's like, one of the things for me is I started to feel left behind. It's like, no matter how good I got at the traditional method, it's like it wouldn't be the current method. And I'll tell you, even it's like I said, we've kind of been, life is difficult to put everything in the basket, and I try and overdo it sometimes. So I haven't been able to progress at my drafting the way I want. But it's like, I've also realized that I also need people on my staff that maybe are better than I am at it, so that I can focus on some other things. But that being said, though, it's the right tool, because now, because I build stuff, physically by hand. I have an idea and just go right to the machine and start cutting parts or making something. Well, I have to make it and then go, oh, I could do this. But the neat thing is like in the digital world, in the drafting world, not only can we put it together and go, what about this? And you try and go, no, hey, it looks stupid, or go, well, that's never going to work. This other part has an interference issue or whatever. It's like, it really, despite the kind of weight factor on the beginning, because like you could be out in the shop making it, but you can make it wrong 3 times. Is like once you kind of take into account the success of getting it right the first time and having done some research on your part before you even make it, is such a huge benefit. And it's like, while we haven't been able to take complete and total grasp of it and use it, in its full capacity, it has changed how we do things, and it's changed how I see things, and it's changed our effectiveness and how fast we get to an effective part. And so it's been one of those things, like, I feel like we are in the tail of the race, desperately clawing at whatever dirt's left to try and catch up. But ultimately, we'll get there. And I think that it's definitely one of the biggest tools that's come around in the last 2 decades to make, and then to filter down from big industry, from aerospace, from whether it's food production or chemical production, all kinds of things, to fall all the way down from the engineering ladder into building hot rods. And it seems like these days, if you want to be a top tier hot rod parts provider, you're scanning, you're doing work in digital, and it's like, and you're checking this stuff. And so at some point, people are even starting to do CFD analysis on things whenever we get into performance stuff before they even cut, before they turn a machine on. It's like they have a reasonable idea of what the outcome is, and that moves the needle so much by knowing what you like. There's what you want to get, and then you can see how close to what you want to get before you even make a first chip. And so I think it makes getting effective parts to market fast even faster. And so for us, we're a very small company and we're desperate and clawing to get there, and I think we will. But it's so interesting to see, like on my Instagram feed or just going into other people's shops, to see how they've utilized the technology. And then the one thing that's so great is we live in this wonderful time of hot rodding where, you know, there are so many tools are available at a reasonable price point to get people to doing cutting edge stuff. And I think it's the greatest time. It's like I've never been a fan of as many builders before as I am right now. It's like so many people doing just so incredible stuff, and a lot of it is the fact that they finally have the tools to meet their imagination.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like Jim and Mike are scanning everything and doing carbon fiber molds now, and like the fit that they talk about is insane, you know. And you look at Can Dig It, you know, they're scanning everything and doing all that, and it's amazing like you mentioned, the automotive aerospace type quality parts they're building today, you know, for a 50s or 60s hot rod is phenomenal.
Yeah, it is wild, you know. It's science fiction stuff. I mean, it is. It's the way of the future, and it's exciting to be here. And I feel like while this has been coming for a long time, I feel like this is a very exciting time because it's become so real and it's so available that its modernization, that its continual progression is happening at light speed now, you know. And so I think this is just a really, really exciting time that individuals, the small companies, can be so involved in such high tech stuff. And you can see how hard it moves the needle these days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. When you can build a truck that handles like a C6 Corvette and gets 26 miles to the gallon with the AC on that you could drive to Florida, it's so amazing.
It's amazing. But like my dad always said, it's just cubic dollars. With enough cubic dollars, everything's possible.
That's a very good point. Very good point. So, we should probably let you go. Where do you, I mean, anyone that doesn't know where to find Aaron Kaufman and Arclight Fab, I don't know what to say, but where would you like them to go find more about what you guys are doing?
Well, if you go to the website or Facebook or the Instagram, and it's Arclight Fab on all of them, and kind of see what we're up to, what we're getting into, and definitely some new side stuff these days too. But we just bought a shop. We're just getting it back on its feet. I'm very proud of it. Well, we're located in Grand Prairie, Texas. We haven't publicly made the shop location known, but by the end of the year, well, the shop will be blowing and going, and the retail will be done, and we'll try and be out there as much as possible. But go to the Facebook, the website. We prefer the website, which should be arclightfab.com. And kind of check it out, and then we'll be back in the manufacturing race. Hopefully by the end of the year, we completed our 61, 2, 3, and 4 suspensions and drivetrain swaps, and so we're kind of moving on to a couple of the other generations. And we've just kind of been on ice the last couple of months due to the move, but we all experience things differently in our lives. But yeah, come by, check it out, and then hopefully by the end of the year, we can host people at the shop, and we'd love to see everybody smiling face.
Awesome. Thanks again, man.
Yes.
Thank you.
You've just listened to the 3D Experience with John and Mike. Subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes to catch up on upcoming episodes.